Time's not linear.
Time works differently. Time's not linear. I've been looking forward to this since before Infinity War. Let's go.
I've been looking forward to this since before Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1.
I've been looking forward to this since before the original Batman. Now we're talking about DC, which we don't like to do. So we're going to move on. We're going to move on.
Trash universe. Hello and welcome to May the Review Be With You with Nick and Joe. I'm Joe.
I'm Nick.
And today we're talking about Loki, something we're really excited about. We've been excited to talk about Loki Season 2 since probably Loki Season 1 ended.
Yes.
And here we are.
I've been waiting for this.
To talk.
I've been waiting for this since Iron Man died. That's how long I've been waiting for Loki Season 2.
So that only works, I feel like, if like time travel shenanigans are involved, because Iron Man didn't die until. Okay, you're nodding your head. Okay, so you're doing a thing. You're doing a time travel thing. Time's not linear.
Time works differently. Time's not linear. I've been looking forward to this since before Infinity War. Let's go.
I've been looking forward to this since before Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1.
I've been looking forward to this since before the original Batman. Now we're talking about DC, which we don't like to do. So we're going to move on. We're going to move on.
Trash universe.
The trash universe, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Maybe one day they'll get it together, but it's not today. So we're talking about Loki.
Today's not that day. Yes.
Nick, you've already displayed some excitement. I've displayed some excitement. Before we get into the episodes, talk to me about what it is that you like about the Loki series. Why were you looking forward to this?
Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson have some of the best on-screen chemistry that I think we've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Honestly, TV in general, it's like they're so good together. It's incredible. And so I was really looking forward to that. I've been a huge fan of Jonathan Majors and the way that he's portrayed Kang and He Who Remains. And so I've been really looking forward to seeing him as well, which we'll get to later. And yeah, it's probably the best written show that they've done. In my opinion, it's my favorite show that they've done from the season 1. And then, so far it's really gotten started off really well. So yeah, those are my quick takeaways. What about you?
I'm going to echo a lot of the same of that. I mean, we came right off of WandaVision, which was really great, into Loki, and somehow that was even more interesting. I think I've said it on here before. Nick, you know this about me. I'm a sucker for time travel stuff. As soon as that was like announced as like the plot of this, it was like, yep, I'm all in, baby. And like season 2 is already like more timey whimey than season 1, which is even, it's got me, it's got my full attention.
Well, let's get into the time travel, because that's how the first episode kicks off, right? Like we just see Loki getting ripped apart like through time, jumping from the past, jumping to the future.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm on you. I'm on your time.
I got a quick summary. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into episode 1. A quick reminder: Loki season 2 hits the ground running as Loki sprints away from the TVA agents of the past. The Asgardian discovers he's time slipping between the TVA's past, present, and future. Something before not thought was possible. The TVA becomes divided over the disappearance of Miss Minutes and Renslayer, as well as the infinite branches coming from the sacred timeline. Mobius takes Loki to meet Ouroboros, better known as OB, who identifies Loki as time-slipping and informs the gang that the time loom of the sacred timeline is overloading. They must fix Loki's time-slipping while protecting the TVA from the chronal radiation. Okay. There's a lot in there. Nick,
that's a packed first episode.
First episode. And I think in most cases this would be too much. But Nick, what were your impressions of this episode?
The immediate chaos was fantastic, and it brilliant, really too, right? Because at the end of season 1, when Loki comes back from the end of time, he sees Mobius, and Mobius has no idea who he is, and so like. We've watched a bunch of other Marvel TV shows and films since then. We just got done with Ant-Man a few months ago. And our thoughts are that, we're completely wondering, like, what happened? Is he on a different timeline? Like, I think a lot of our thoughts were Loki came back and he is on a branch timeline that has now come about because He Who Remains has died. And so I think that was our thought. And the second we find out that he was in the past instead, I was just like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And he's just time slipping between the past and the present. And wherever he time slips is where he ends up in the past or the future, which it's some super cool scenes. That's that was my initial thought right from the get go. What about you?
Okay, so this is related to the opening scenes, but like this is pretty present throughout this episode. Um, I feel like the word that you use, like the chaos, the pandemonium, absolutely. Uh, they they being the directors, the editor, Tom Hiddleston, those in charge of the camera work do such an amazing job of instilling fear and anxiety in you. Like I was nervous throughout this whole episode, especially when Loki's like
Yeah,
running around like trying to like get someone to remember him and like, he comes to realize he's in the past when he's talking to Casey. Um,
yeah,
and the anxiety that like Tom Hiddleston is able to demonstrate, the paranoia and the
yeah.
fear that he's able to show as this character that we've come to know for so long now. He
And
Go ahead.
sorry, and the simple. I want to touch on this because you mentioned it, and the simple way that they let us know that he realizes, like how he realizes that he was in the past, with the mid air. Where was he? It's just like in a vehicle, a floating vehicle, very Star Wars esque in that scene. I think where he's like, they've got the float the my God, what the hell is the word I'm looking for? Whatever, the floating transportation, and then the truck crashes through the window, and then wiggles like the TV where it shows the timeline, and it cracks the floor, and then he's pulled apart, and time slips back to the present, and realizes, or no, realizes that he was in the past because the crack on the floor is there. Just like, I don't know, I just love that. That was like simple but awesome.
No, it really is.
uh,
The direction of this episode, like I know we are big fans of the finale of Loki, and a lot of that has to do with Jonathan Majors' performance as He Who Remains, and that is certainly true. This might be my favorite episode of Loki from like a directorial process. For all the storytelling that we learn based on like what's happening in the environment around us, right? Like that crack in the floor, that was a brilliant way of like showing us like that's the past. The thing that happens later with skin, like in the dust, showing us that that's the future.
yeah,
Really, really clever ways to do that. The level of fear and anxiety that's like amplified. Uh, like Tom Hiddleston's performance, it's amplified by like this shaky camera that's like following Loki around as he's like panicking, trying to get people to hear what he's saying. Right. I want to point this out. The duo that directed this episode was Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. Um, they're they're a tag team, and I think before this, I'm not too familiar with their work, but the thing that they did before this was they worked on Moon Knight, which very much also has that
oh,
same kind
nice,
of like paranoia,
very
you
cool.
know?
Yep, that's
Yeah,
great. That's great.
I thought that was really interesting too. Those guys really have that feeling down, right? They know how to demonstrate that.
Yeah, yeah, they got that across really well. I mean, that was a high-powered episode the whole time, pretty
hmm
much.
I want to ask you a question. We are
Yep.
introduced to a new character in this episode. We're introduced to Ouroboros, uh, who's played
Ouroboros.
by Ki Hui Kwan, who, of course, very well known for a lot of stuff. Recently, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Uh, what'd you think about OB?
Ah, so far, even after this third episode, he is like stealing the show for me. I love him. He's my favorite character right now. Like, I need more of OB. And I need him to say, we're all gonna die, like way more times than he It's so freaking funny, man. He's like, uh it's such like it's a nice, I don't know how to describe it. Like the addition of his character is such like it's like uplifting but doomsday at the same time.
No, he's so delightful and matter of fact about it.
He's like delightful he's delightful in the doom. So it's really cool. And that scene in the
so
first episode where the scene where Mobius and Loki go to talk to him about the time slipping, and he's like, it's not possible to time slip in the TVA. Well, then how did I do it? He's like, oh, I'm having trouble reconciling that. It's just like, oh my God.
That is weird.
It's so funny.
Reconciling with that.
It's weird. Yeah. And then Loki time slips to the past in that room, which is such a cool concept. And then he's like talking to Ouroboros in the past, and as he's talking to him in the past, like his future self or his present self is remembering the conversation and able to kind of like put it all together. And then all of a sudden, like he's basically had hundreds of years to create this device.
It is really cool thinking that like the three of them are actually having that conversation, but from two different points in time.
Yeah.
Or I guess four of them, right? Because there are two OBs.
So yeah. It was so well done. It was like, I could watch that scene 100 times. That was such a cool time travel scene. Got to be one of the best time travel scenes ever. Like, ever.
I really enjoyed the humor of that. I have a small nitpick with that scene. It's not necessarily a flaw depending on how they spin this, but based on what we know about time travel in the MCU, that shouldn't be possible, right? Like poor Scott Lang gets made fun of for talking about like this exact example of manipulating the past, and they're like, that's not how time travel works, stupid. And then like here it is, like actually it's exactly how it works.
Right.
Which I guess they kind of break the rules of time travel in that very movie where they set up the rules of time travel. My headcanon for this though is that since the TVA is the closest location to the source of all time energy, that maybe like time can be like more easily manipulated around that area.
Yeah, and there's clearly a break in the Matrix somewhere too, because obviously like things are falling apart and there's like so many timelines branching off that it feels like the rules of time travel may only apply when there's only a sacred timeline and not a million different universes currently happening. So it'll be an interesting thing to see if they really if we find out more about it as a show.
I got a couple more things just for this episode. One more OB thing.
Yeah.
When they're walking over to the time loom, the sacred loom, and OB is explaining why the power disruption is such a bad thing, and he starts talking about the TVA manual, which, wow, they're emphasizing that manual and OB a lot in this season. We're going to talk more about that later. I'm very curious about your thoughts on that. But there's that wonderful moment where OB, just being a badass at his job, just throws the manual behind him, and Tom Hiddleston grabs it midair. I rewound that scene over and over and over again to see if that was CGI. I'm convinced it's not. I'm convinced they did that on purpose, because like the thing that gave it away for me is Tom Hiddleston tracks the book like throughout the air the entire time in the proper direction where it is. So like I'm convinced they did that. They actually did that.
They might have. I was wondering about it too. I would love to know, one, if you're correct, and I have a feeling that you are, because it feels like it's something that they could definitely at least do like 10 takes of and probably get one, right? And then my other thing is, how many takes did they have to do if it was done?
That's what I want to know.
For real. And my third question is, was that actually even in the script, or did he ad-lib the throw, and then did Tom Hiddleston actually
That
catch it on the
you
one
know, now
take.
that you say that, that does kind of feel like the kind of movie magic that might just happen like in the moment. Man, that would be awesome.
Right. Because because they really flow. I mean, obviously they're
Mhm.
phenomenal actors, so of course it flowed well. But it flowed really well to where I was like, man, it didn't even like miss. It didn't even feel like nothing felt forced. I was like, I wonder if that was just off the cuff, and then it just ended up working. That would be so cool. Either way, I hope it was done live. Like, I hope it wasn't CGI because that's like a super
Agreed.
cool moment.
Yeah. Really awesome scene on the way to the time loom. Time loom, really interesting concept. Interesting lore about
Yep.
how the TVA functions and where it is in like the grander scheme of the multiverse. I guess. Um, that was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we haven't talked about it enough. Owen Wilson in this episode is just amazing comedic relief uh, throughout everything,
Yeah.
especially with him arguing with Loki about like whether or not it's better to be erased molecule by molecule throughout time or to just have your skin peeled off of you. This feels like
Right.
the kind of argument I would have gotten into with like you or like my other friends in college, like screaming at the top of our lungs, like which is worse. Um, I just love
Right.
how he just obsesses over it throughout the rest of the episode. He's so funny.
Yeah.
We also got more B5 in this episode, Hunter B5. Um, I'm
Yeah.
really interested in that character. We'll get into her in episode 2, but before we move on to there, was there anything about episode 1 you wanted to discuss?
Yeah. The other thing is it has to be the last part when, um, I guess the executives of the TVA are meeting in the room trying to figure out what the next order of business is, and um, Loki had gone there looking for Mobius as he's being pulled between the past and the present, and he ends up there in the past when the room is empty, and on the wall is like multiple murals of Kang the Conqueror and his variants, and he plays this little radio message, which is he who remains
No,
in
it's
Miss Minutes
it's
talking,
Renslayer.
um, or Renslayer, excuse me, and Renslayer talking, and then he gets time slips back to the present, and in the present in the room there's a painting over the statues of Kang, and he remains, and that seems like we don't have to really talk about like what the TVA heads were talking about, but I loved how Loki is still like obviously in that moment he's still super chaotic because he has no idea what's going on, and he's like trying to find Mobius who knows him. This is like the moment where he's like, oh, you know me, you know who I am, like blah blah blah. And Loki's like looking at the room, he's like, wait a minute, something's different. And he and he ends up like destroying the mural that is covering He Who Remains and the variants. And everyone in the room is just like, how the hell did he know that was there? Like, what is this? Like, it's like kind of like a cool moment for everyone to know that like everyone is way underqualified for whatever is currently happening in the universe.
Right. I actually thought this is what you were going to bring up. When Loki time slips into the future, which I think it's our. I mean, we don't know if he time slipped into the future earlier, but it's our only indication that he's actually in the future. And like everything's falling apart. The secret timeline appears to be overloading way too much, or the loom is overloading way too much. And he's looking to get pruned. He walks toward or he walks toward a phone that's ringing. Very, very weird. Felt
Right.
very
Super weird.
losty, very lostish. And he sees Sylvie in an elevator. Before he can really take a moment to absorb that, because of course this is the person he wants to see, someone prunes him from behind. Which I have a lot of thoughts on. Actually, no, I just have one very loud thought. That's got to be Loki, right? Like Loki has to prune Loki in that scene, right? Like I feel like that's what it is.
Oh yeah. You know what? I I don't think that I got during the episode that
Yeah,
he
he's
was
pruned
pruned
by
by someone.
someone moves behind him. We can't see who it is, and they get him from behind.
I don't know why. I must have forgot that detail or I missed it somehow. That's awesome, and it has to be Loki. And we're gonna get and we're probably gonna get that scene like next episode, maybe even because now
Thinking toward the finale.
or no, Sylvie's not
that
back
feels
at.
like, yeah.
Maybe toward the finale, yeah, because
Not yet.
Sylvie's not back at the TVA. It's at the moment after episode 3. So she was for a second in 2, but we'll get there. Yeah, that's super interesting. And also that scene was a little infuriating because the phone's ringing for what feels like forever, and the elevator doors are opening for what feels like forever. Meanwhile, he really needs to prune himself so that he doesn't get lost to time forever. And I'm just like, I feel like his urgency is like misguided here. he's worried
totally
about the
agree.
wrong things in this moment.
My anxiety is going
thankfully-
through the roof as he's doing this. Like, what are you doing?
I was like, what is this
Yeah.
guy doing? So thankfully someone pruned him. You know,
That
it might have been Mobius
That was so
as well.
convincing.
You know?
There was
that
a
would be super
moment
interesting.
where I truly believed like, oh, he's not gonna make it. Not that I thought like something bad was gonna happen to Loki, because obviously it's just episode 1. But I was like, wow, damn it, he's actually
Right.
not gonna make it. I bought it for a
Yeah.
moment. It's good storytelling.
Yeah. And then, of course, he gets pruned, and Mobius, you know, hangs out there long enough on the bridge to grab Loki from time, basically, as himself without time slipping. And he's basically all put back together, and we can kind of continue on from there. Was there anything else in the first episode we wanted to
just Sylvie at
touch on
McDonald's?
besides that?
But honestly, we can get more into that in the second episode. Okay. All right,
Yeah.
episode 2.
Sweet. Let's
Loki
do
and
it.
Mobius are looking for Hunter X5, who has information on Sylvie, who Loki is desperately trying to find. They capture and they kind of mess with him a little bit until he reveals her location. Meanwhile, Judge Dox is pruning all branches of the sacred timeline. There's a lot that happens in this episode, but that's more or less like the summary. Nick, if you
Yeah.
don't... Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really the main point, right? Like the episode kind of starts it starts like almost more chaotic than, not chaotic, but definitely more confusing than really the first episode, because they're just like hunting down Brad like, right at the beginning. We're just like, wait, what is going on right now? Like, why are they here? Like, why are they hunting Brad down? You know, and obviously we come to find out that like he was supposed to be hunting Sylvie, and instead of hunting Sylvie, he is just parading around as a movie star in the past or on this timeline. And that was cool though, because we kind of got like we got a little bit of a chase scene. We got to see Loki use some magic, which is always a plus, especially the scene when he catches Brad and he's using 2 shadows to hold Brad against the wall. And then there's 3 Lokis standing there, and Mobius walks up and he's clearly talking to Loki in the middle. But all of a sudden you realize the Loki on the right is actually the Loki technically, depending on how you're looking, but the Loki to the left of Mobius is actually
he's even fooled
the one
Mobius.
who's in charge.
Yeah.
So that I love scenes like that. Yeah, I love scenes like that. But the most important part of that episode obviously is the very end. But I guess we could probably talk about I think my favorite part is the interrogation scenes with Brad, and yeah, I'm interested to see what you have to say before we get into that.
All right, I want to be
or you
very
can pick it up
clear
from there
on this. I enjoyed watching this episode, and obviously I love this show. If the last episode was one of my favorite episodes from the Loki show, I think this episode is my least favorite, only because of how jarring it is. And it's not jarring in the idea of like in the first episode we literally hit the ground running. We hit the ground running in like a really weird way in this episode. It feels like we're missing scenes before like we get into it. And I guess one of the reasons I feel that way is one thing I thought was really interesting when we meet Brad or Hunter X5 and Judge Dox in the first episode. We're clearly expanding on the TVA, right? And we're getting kind of the fallout of what's happened in season 1, and we're watching the TVA tear itself apart as a result of that. And it kind of felt like we were going to explore that a bit more and kind of see like how the TVA kind of salvages itself, at least as far as its organization goes. Whereas like this episode, it almost feels like it like makes a decision of we're not doing that. We're gonna try and put this storyline down as fast as we can because we have other time travel stuff that we need to get to. Which like, hey, I agree. I'm more interested in that stuff anyway. Um, but it just seemed so startling to like just all of a sudden just we're doing this now and I'm Loki, me Mobius and Hunter B5, we lead the TVA now, I guess. Um yeah, it
Right.
was very
Right.
odd.
Well, I mean, they did kind of establish that. They kind of established that in that, the executive room, in the first episode. But like, yeah, it definitely was startling, and it was. You are correct. There definitely felt like it was like we're missing scenes. Like we missed a scene. Like there's a scene that we didn't get, and we're like, what's going on? And even like the interrogation scenes with Hunter X5, like or Brad, he like the actor was actually either like really really good, or the scenes are meant to feel very like almost strange. Like I don't know how to describe it. Like I really enjoyed them, but like his mannerisms, like like nothing matters, and it does. Like let me go back to being a movie star, and like I'm not gonna participate in your stupid game because this is all fake, and like it was so interesting how
Well,
he
especially
was like
compared
expressing
to
himself
like
in that scene,
when we met him in the
and
first
like
episode, right? Like he was clearly like having a problem coming to grips with everything.
yeah,
And then all of a sudden in this episode, which like don't get me wrong, I think this
right,
progression makes sense, but we didn't get to see the progression, and all of a sudden in this episode he's just like nothing matters. Like which
right,
like logical conclusion.
right, and
Hmm.
right, especially with what we find out later, right? The reason nothing matters
Yeah.
is because all these timelines are about to get branched or about to get completely nixed. And so he's just like he's in on the plan, he knows what's going to happen, and nothing matters because it's all going back to one timeline very very quickly in his mind. So um and then of course like the scene when they come back to interrogate him for the second time, and they bring that machine, and they do, they obviously they trick him into thinking that Loki's going off the reservation and just going
Oh,
completely
that's a great
nuts
scene.
to
Yeah.
get to basically pseudo torture him in a way.
I mean,
It's such a good
Tom
that
Hiddleston
is a top scene
is
right there.
always
That was
great
so
as
cool.
Loki. But that was a great reminder of why we all originally fell in love with his performance. He's so good at being the villain, you know, at being that like
Yeah,
that evil person in the room.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. He's so good at that. And now you're just reminding me too of the
Yeah.
scene when they're getting pie together, right? It's like the break. It's basically the scene between the first interrogation and the second one where they're getting pie, trying to calm down Mobius because he just got,
Mm.
he just got, Brad got him good. And, and Loki brings up, he's like, yeah, I was so upset. I was so upset with my brother and my father that I went down to New York City and held the whole city hostage with an alien army. Who does that? Like, it's just making it like brushing it over like it was just like, oh, I was
I
just a
love that
little
because like
upset,
you're right, comedically that's hilarious. But like for him to say that kind of makes sense. Like he's a god. Like it kind of makes sense that that's how he would view it, right? Like it's not nearly as
Right,
important.
right, exactly, right. And it's instead of me like passively aggressively like not talking to you for a week if I was mad at you,
Right.
he like is a god, so
Yeah,
he can
just
just
had a
grab an
temper
alien army and
tantrum,
go
held all
hold a
of New
city
York
hostage in
hostage.
some random world.
No,
Like,
it was just a phase. It was just a phase.
right, no big deal. Yeah, and also really quick, I love this scene when Loki's pressing Mobius. When this is happening in the same scene with the pie eating, he's pressing Mobius about like, well, don't you want to know what your life was and blah blah blah, and like, don't you want to know what if it was something bad? What if it was what if it was something good? And he's just like, if it's something bad, I can handle. If it was something good, I don't want to know. I'd rather this is my life, So it was such a cool episode because we got the juxtaposition of someone like Mobius who is like essentially accepted that his life is the TVA and he wants to do good here, and he doesn't want to worry about what his life could have been before He Who Remains took him. But then you have someone like X5 or Brad who is like, I had a life before, none of this matters, like total opposite thought process of Mobius, basically. And so it's kind of cool to see the two sides, basically, right? And you get where both sides are coming from. And so, like, at the end of the episode, when we finally figure out what the whole plan has been, it's almost, you almost can't blame those members of the TVA for doing what they're doing, because everyone's life is basically ripped apart with the knowledge of it all being fake, if you will.
Glad you brought up the pie scene. Pie scene's really interesting. That pie scene is really interesting. There's a weird kind of focus on pie in this episode. Like, they're surrounded by pies. He talks about how much he loves the pie, right? And then, like, they go to McDonald's, and, like, the first thing he says, like, when they enter, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get a slice of apple pie."
Yeah.
I'm like, why do they keep bringing this up? Why do they keep talking about pie?
Right.
I don't know. That set off, like, my alarm bells a little bit. It's like, that feels weirdly on purpose. I don't know why. I feel like pie's coming back in some kind of weird way. Something. The time pie.
They're trying to bring back pie.
One other thing about that scene that also set off some alarm bells. The conversation you're talking about when Loki and Mobius are discussing who Mobius possibly could have been on the timeline. And, like you said, doesn't want to know. He drops the phrase of, "I'd like to thank the guy who's responsible for me being here." Right? Like, in a time travel show, like, that feels like the sort of, like, line you put to, like, revisit later, right? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah. I think he may regret
maybe
those
some
words.
Dramatic irony.
Well, he's meening he met a variant in episode 3, so he's getting closer.
I wonder though if, like,
getting
they're
closer.
setting it up for, like, some dramatic irony or something. Like it's either, like, it's Hunter X5 who's responsible for him being in the TVA, which he just got angry at him, right? Or maybe it's Loki, right? Like, he's sitting in front of the man who's responsible for him being there.
Oh man. Can you imagine? Oh my God, I just had a vision. Can you imagine? Because Loki is so gung-ho on, his whole thing was he paused at the end of time at season 1 and wanted to think about it and discuss possibly taking over the role of keeping the sacred timeline. And Sylvie was hell-bent on finishing her mission, which was to destroy He Who Remains so that all these other countless lives could flourish, basically. And what if the future of this basically is Loki is actually the one who, like, forms part of the TVA, right? Like, this is, now my mind is blown because I had a thought and then it just kind of it got grabbed because we know He Who Remains did, right? But there's a real chance, because clearly Loki and He Who Remains are aligned, right, with what their mission was. So there is a future possibly of this ending with Loki and He Who Remains actually working together to get the timeline back in order, which would mean Loki then is going to be the person to potentially recruit a lot of these TVA members.
Glorious purpose.
Yeah, this is it. We just figured it out. We figured it out. We figured it out. We just figured it out. Marvel,
sorry.
You're welcome.
Yeah, sorry for ruining it.
Or we're sorry, I guess, for spoiler alert. Yeah, the title is going to be spoiler alert in these YouTube shorts. We figured it out.
Feels like
we figured it out.
It does kind of feel like the direction.
That would be.
Oh God, that would just create, like, such a bigger division between him and Sylvie. Geez. No.
Yeah, I don't see that working out very well, especially now. Like, and we can get into it now with how the episode 2 ended, right? Like, episode 2 ends, so, like, Sylvie's made peace. She's working at McDonald's. She's like, this is exactly what I want. I want a normal life. I know that there's millions of people living now because of me. And then we find out very quickly, once they all arrive there, that there's a bigger plan in place and a bunch of these branch timelines are about to be completely obliterated. And there's millions of lives are about to be lost. And this is something that I honestly did not foresee, because the chaos that ensued after they killed He Who Remains was exactly what Sylvie wanted. And I did not foresee half of the TVA like still being, aligned with He Who Remains' and TVA's original mission of the sacred timeline, right? Like, because we only got a couple shots of certain TVA members who knew that they had their lives taken from them and they wanted something else, or members like Mobius who didn't want to kill people who are now alive because of a branch timeline, but wanted to maybe figure out how to deal with this in a different way. But there's obviously a whole slew of TVA members who are like, no, we have to get the sacred timeline back on track, just like He Who Remains would have wanted. And so like this episode basically ends with just like, tons of branches being completely obliterated, which is essentially like where where it all kind of starts. And like in a way I was like, well, what the hell is the point of all this if like everything is like back to normal now? Which technically I guess it's not, because I don't think we have one sacred timeline still. There's a couple branches because they did stop it.
Yeah, so
right?
There's still some branches,
before, I think
but like
they all got obliterated. I think.
Like, wait, what was the point of all this? Because like, I mean, if the premiere is to be believed, the finale shows us the future, right? The future vision that we saw in the premiere tells us that the loom is still going to get overloaded, so there's still more branches that are going to come. Yeah,
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, we really bum rush into that climax where they're just kicking ass and they're taking down the TVA agents, the rogue TVA agents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It happened super quick. We really don't have any answers. Sylvie goes back to the TVA for a second and is just like heartbroken because this is the exact opposite of what she wanted. And she's like blaming Loki and everyone else, which, I can't blame her for that. And then she goes back to her branch that was still there, and just has a moment with one of the employees, which is like a little weird, but it's fine.
Like, so we meet that kid at the end of episode 1. Oh yeah.
The kid definitely has a
like
crush on her, but she's
old.
Obviously too old for him, and like she's clearly given him a ride home a couple times. It's just very awkward.
Like it's weird to me.
In today's day and age, it would not be appropriate.
So the end of that episode, this is what I was getting at with Hunter B5. Hunter B5 has this moment where she's looking at like their monitor and she's watching like how all the timelines are gone, right? And she says like, she doesn't say the timelines are gone. She says those were people, right? Which she's right. That is like really sad. But like we as the audience don't like really connect with that, right? Because like we can't imagine what that is. But like the timeline that Sylvie was just on did have like a sweet little kid like who like loves his job at McDonald's, and like I don't know why, like if we wanted to feel emotion for that scene, why didn't we spend more time with that character and then prune that timeline?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a fantastic point. That's a miss. That's a huge miss, because you're right. Like we didn't.
And Sylvie has the same reaction as
B5
like,
if she would not have been able to go to that timeline.
She's like horrified.
But we would have felt more loss, and we would have felt her loss more if that would have been the result with that timeline being obliterated, which it wasn't, to our knowledge. So based on the end of the episode scene. So yeah, that's a great point. It'll be interesting to see why, if we get a reason why, if there's more to it.
I think so. No, I think
we can move on to 3.
So,
what do you? Is there anything else?
Loved it. Okay. Episode 2, I was like, whoa, weird. Episode 3 immediately restored my faith in this show. Not that I was lost, but I was like, uh-oh, maybe this is a sign of bad things to come. Episode 3. We follow Renslayer and Miss Minutes in Chicago, 1867, where they deliver a copy of the TVA handbook to the 1868. Thank you. Where they deliver a copy of the TVA handbook to the boy who will become He Who Remains. Loki and Mobius go to 1893. Do I have that right? All right, cool. To 1893, the time of the Chicago World's Fair. It becomes a rat
Yep,
race to grab
that's
He Who
correct. Yep.
Remains, with all previously named parties, and including Sylvie. Miss Minutes reveals her love for He Who Remains, which is wild. Uh, Loki and Mobius manage to take He Who Remains to the TVA before Sylvie can kill him. Sylvie then sends Miss Minutes and Renslayer to the end of time, where Miss Minutes reveals she knows a secret about Renslayer. Here we are.
Yeah, insane. Also,
That's
quick little
true. That's
clip
actually
there.
really.
Technically,
He has
it's
not
Mr.
become He Who
Mr.
Remains
Timely,
yet.
right? Not He Who
Yeah.
Remains. So he has not become He
It's
Who
a
Remains,
variant
and
of
that's a
him.
variant that
Good
isn't
correction.
He Who Remains, technically, right? It's a variant of He Who Remains. So it's Mr. Timely, but maybe it's also okay to call
But
him He
you're
Who
right.
Remains
We
because
want
I
to be
think
right
everyone
about
it's
this.
just a nice, everyone knows who you're talking about for the most part, but it's technically a variant. It's technically a variant of He Who Remains called Mr. Timely. Who
Con man. Yeah.
he's a swindler, and he's like a swindler in the
He's a
late
con
1800s.
man, but like
He's a con man.
He's a con
Very
man.
I was
Yeah.
like, you know,
But he's actually
it was
made
so-
some like
he's a con man.
actual.
but he's a brilliant, but he's actually smart. Yeah, yeah.
technologically out of this world objects, right?
It's the classic thing of like, man is too smart in his time frame.
That was.
Technology has not caught up to how smart he is, kind of thing, right? Like it was a really cool way to do that. But before we really get into the episode,
I'm so glad you brought this
the
up. Hold on
first
to
thing I
silence.
wrote down
Yes.
was the cartoony theme music at the beginning.
It's ragtime music.
It's like the carnival-esque music at the beginning. I was like, whoa, what is going on? Ragtime music. This is very cool. So it's very cool. And then once we got to the World's Fair, I was like, okay, it makes sense. I get it.
So
yeah, very cool.
I'm not going to say his name right. The man who is responsible for the MCU like music, like the MCU like studio logo music, is Michael Giacchino. And I bring him up. I don't know if he's responsible for the ragtime music. He probably is because he does like most of their stuff. I bring him up because he had his directorial debut last year at around this exact time for Werewolf by Night. So after like years of like working with Marvel in a musical way, he got to have like an actual like movie project with Werewolf by Night, which just had its color debut this week, which we should review that. I'm just saying. That's a really fun property we should get into. Oh, for the record, Giacchino.
All right, we'll talk about it.
Please correct me.
About it.
I didn't know this until I looked it up, Nick. He's responsible for the music in The Batman recently, Rogue One. And you ready for the last one? You ready for the last one?
Oh my gosh!
Yes, it's something that you and I both love and cherish.
It's disgusting. Can I try to guess it?
I'll give you a clue. It's not
Rogue
superhero
One and
or Star Wars related.
The Batman.
It's old.
Oh damn! It's old?
I think it ended in 2010.
How old are we talking?
Oh yeah, cherish is maybe too strong a word. We both loved it when it was on.
And we both cherish it?
Can you imagine? Is
it Yu-Gi-Oh? Is it Zoids? Like, what are we? Yu-Gi-Oh was a dumb thing for me to say. That was stupid, actually. In hindsight,
both loved and cherished Yu-Gi-Oh and Zoids. Obviously,
I don't know why those are two things I'm thinking of.
Not superhero.
Wait, when it was on. Wait.
You be lost.
But you said it's not
thinking.
Superhero. Ah, shit. No, I got
it's
nothing.
lost.
You're gonna have to tell me.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Ah,
damn, that's really cool.
It's lost. Nice. Oh, fantastic.
But yeah, I'm glad you brought up that
that's
the
cool.
ragtime intro.
That's a cool little detail. Neat. Yeah.
Never apologize for Yu-Gi-Oh and Zoids.
I apologize for my Yu-Gi-Oh and Zoids comment. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, that's facts. That's facts only. Okay, so we've got the timeline. We know where we are. We're in 1893 Chicago World's Fair. The first like 8 minutes, 10 minutes of this episode. So like the second that we see Renslayer appear in 1868, I was like, oh my God, we're gonna see Kang this episode, or He Who Remains, or who, like the variant. We're gonna see Jonathan Majors in this episode. I knew it the second that the scene opened in 1868. I was like, oh my God, this is it. And from that moment, it was literally like, I feel like they were just like stretching a rubber band, like waiting for the moment to see him, because it was like they were just building the anticipation for me so well, and I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, when is he gonna come? When is he gonna come? And obviously, they get a hit back at the TVA. Mobius and Loki end up in 1868. They don't see anything. They go to 1893, World's Fair, and they realize quickly, okay, this is probably a great place to look around. And they see they see Miss Minutes in a newspaper. It gives them an idea. So it gives them direction, basically, of where to go for they meet in this, like, tent-esque place where there's going to be like a demonstration, or like a showcase, if you will. And still the rubber band is like, the tension is gripping. And we get the silhouette of Mr. Timely, the variant of He Who Remains. And he's like giving a speech. And yeah, and then of course, like, the lights turn on and you get like a close up, and you're just like, oh my God. And the fear in Loki's eyes was so good. Like, Hiddleston he's just so awesome. And you could feel the fear. And Mobius is like, this guy, he seems like a nice guy. Like, freaking Mobius, man, just doesn't listen. He has no idea. Oh man, it was so cool. It was such a cool first like 10 to 12 minutes,
totally,
like, where they're just like
now
waiting to meet him, or this new variant that we haven't got to meet yet.
I feel like I didn't appreciate that enough, because yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I forgot, I looked it up, but I forgot who directs this episode. There is such a purposeful buildup into like seeing him, and like, what a great way to like show him than like an actual showcase at the World's Fair, no less, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right. That was a brilliant way to like unveil like the character.
Right.
That's a really cool build up.
And of course, he's on stage. He's got this a loom, basically, that he's built back in the 1800s. Like, you're just like, oh my God, this is like so interesting. And I don't even know. And that's when we find out shortly after that, he's trying to sell his invention, and he's just swindling, basically. And the richer the person, the better. It's just earning a living, basically creating real things, but also maybe not creating real things that last. Limited by his
technology,
right? They're kind of, they break, or they're not like very useful, and he's limited by his technology.
I got a fun note for you that I think you'll like.
What else? What do you got? Oh, wait. Yeah. This is still when they're inside the showcase. So this is like, showcase ends, and Mr. Timely is trying to sell his prototype. And, obviously Loki and Mobius have seen Renslayer, and now they're all like trying to get to Mr. Timely. But Loki accidentally like runs into this big guy. He like accidentally hits this big dude, and this big guy's like clearly like pissed off, and he wants to fight Loki. And eventually Loki's just tired of arguing with him, so he just like does magic and makes the guy disappear. And Mobius follows it up with, the amazing Loki, everyone. All right. And it claps it up, and just like everyone just acts like it was like supposed to happen like that. I love that. I was laughing. That was like
you said
Mobius
earlier,
being Mobius. It was fun.
I forgot. I definitely asked you this before. Have you seen the movie Midnight in Paris? Bad. Okay. That's a top 10 movie for me in general, just because I'm a sucker for the subject matter. Not time travel. Well, no, actually, it is time travel. It's a time travel movie.
Oh,
yes. And Nick, wait, here's the best part
of it. A time travel movie that you love that I haven't seen?
It stars
that doesn't
Owen
make any
Wilson
sense.
and Tom Hiddleston. Yeah, it does. No, I'm dead serious. God. They are in it together. I think like
no, it does. You're kidding me.
2009, maybe 2011.
When did this
like
come
one
out?
of my favorite time travel movies. I love this movie. Oh,
I'm not even.
Please tell me your thoughts on it. I'm so excited to talk to you about it.
I'm watching this, if not tonight, tomorrow, and it's not
a
not
Woody
even a
Allen
question.
movie.
Oh
Owen
my
Wilson's
goodness.
a writer who wants to
I can't wait.
feel something.
No, I can't wait.
And I'll let the rest speak for itself. It's pretty good. Anyway, okay, so two things. One fun note.
All right, great.
So at the
Anyway.
beginning, when Renslayer Miss Minutes arrive in 1868 in Chicago, and they go to distribute what is revealed to be the TVA handbook. And again, I want to come back to that. You know how like we get like the banner that says like 1868.
Handbook.
I thought this was a really interesting detail.
Yeah.
At that moment, it says Sacred Timeline. Yeah, but then in 1893. Yeah, 1893.
Sacred
it's a
Timeline.
branched
Yeah.
timeline.
Yeah.
Presumably
I'm so glad you
it's
remembered
a
to bring that up.
branched
Yeah.
timeline when we see Loki and Mobius walk into it.
Is
so
it?
Presumably that's because of what they did. Yeah.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's branched because of the handbook being dropped off, which is what He Remains wanted, because it's his plan
that just goes to show
stay,
you that, like,
to
yes,
somehow
he actually
come back.
is a variant, you know? This is a variant timeline. I thought that was a really cool detail that they threw in there.
Right.
Also, so
such a good detail.
This was an interesting detail, and I'm not sure what to make of it. So there's a moment where, also, I love Owen Wilson being like his detective self, where he's like, yeah, like I'm very cerebral. I absorb the area, you know, like he's very slow and methodical. And they come across statues of Norse gods. It's Odin, it's Thor, and it's Baldur. And they have a conversation about that. It's like kind of emotional to see Loki like looking at them. It ends with a joke, and the joke is funny. But I was really interested why they chose Baldur the Brave. That's a character I don't think we've been introduced to in the MCU yet. It is technically a son of Odin, I think. Yeah, I thought it was weird. Is it? I'm not sure if they're just trying to say like, yeah, no one remembers Loki, or if we are gonna meet Baldur. I don't know. What do you think? Oh, right.
I don't think they don't do stuff like that off the cuff, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's at least in talks, and they're like, well, let's drop him in here in case we do something with him later, so it's set up already. You know, like they do that stuff like that all the time, I think, right? Like they'll drop in stuff.
It felt
just
weird,
in case.
Right? Especially because like Loki's like, no one's heard of Baldur.
That's a very interesting
and
call
Owen Wilson's
out.
like, well, sure,
Nicely
they have
done.
Baldur the Brave, and it's like, what's going on here? Yeah, no, you're right. Marvel does they do stuff like that. That's usually like
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But we might come back.
They don't have everything planned out, but they do little things like that where they're like, we're going to do this. Doesn't mean we have to use it later. But if we do, it'll be cool that we did to use it now. Exactly. Yeah.
Totally right, Captain.
We'll sound really smart, like we had it all planned out.
Fast forward to what you were saying when we're after Victor Timely's demonstration, the rat race begins. Sylvie shows up ready to kill Victor, which I'm glad they gave an explanation for that, because when she first showed up, I was like,
shows up, yep.
What? And then the whole thing of like, she tracked you. I was like, oh, okay, all right. It was quick. That's acceptable. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Cool. We have a reason. I don't think we've talked about this yet. You were waiting for not Victor Timely, for Jonathan Majors as King, and so was I. But something else I was waiting for was Miss Minutes. After the 6th episode of the first season, I was fascinated with that character. What is she? And she reveals that in this episode, right? She's a very sophisticated construct. She's a singularity. Love that joke.
Right.
You're quite singular. You're quite singular yourself. That was very clever. And she's a singularity that, like, I guess craves him and is in love with him.
No, she's a super sophisticated AI that was allowed to develop her own consciousness, basically. and she's like a part of her is in love with He
Yeah.
Who Remains. And there was like a moment where I was like, we're in a love triangle. This is a freaking love triangle.
It
Like,
was
what is going
weird.
on right now? It's an AI love triangle. It's totally honestly, it's totally ridiculous. I am very glad that they nipped that
I was
very quickly.
I was into
Like,
it, but
because I was
I was
not into that.
scared. I was like,
What are
where
they
is
doing right
this
now? Like, this is kind of
going?
coming out of nowhere.
Oh no, I was
Like
disturbed.
fun,
I was
like
very disturbed
I was
while it
like,
was
this
happening.
is alarmingly hilarious, you know, that kind of way. Like, and then very quickly, yeah, of course, and then Miss Minutes like talks Timely into throwing Renslayer overboard, and that was a big moment because then Renslayer realizes, okay, maybe she's by herself, and
I love the use of Miss
it pretty
Minutes, by
much
the way, when they're
nix
on the
the
boat.
love triangle once that happened, I think.
And
Uh,
Renslayer and Victor appear to be having a moment. Then she drops the word, I look forward to like our partnership or whatever it is that she says in the use of partners. So like right before that, like in the background, like Miss Minutes is like staring at them, right? Yeah, and then like
right.
after she says
Yep.
that, and like Victor
Oh,
pulls
thank God.
away,
Thank God.
she like
Yeah.
she very clearly like looks relaxed, and I love like what they do here. Like they cut back to Renslayer, and then they cut back to Victor with Miss Minutes in the background, and Miss Minutes is like looking off into the distance. She's got a smile on, and she's just like very like gently like kicking her legs like in the wind. I loved how like relaxed that was. It's like that was yeah, I that was such a great indicator of like
Yeah.
all going according to plan.
So weird. Yeah. It, and I don't hate that we like this is really the first time we've seen Miss Minutes like actually have like us. It made us realize that like she's how sophisticated of an AI system she actually is because she has her own consciousness and can make her own decisions. And this is the first time we're actually finding that out and even seeing it at work. Like any other time, we could make the case that she's just doing what she was set up to do. This was the first
Yeah,
episode that we've seen her like
yeah.
have her own, like her own free will, which is another big thing about this episode, right? So that was interesting. And I wasn't like against it or anything, but it was definitely weird because it did kind of feel like it came out of nowhere. Although I guess they explained it pretty well. But yeah, like that was it was super funny. I wrote down in my notes two things. I was just, like, I don't even remember what happened when I said this, but it was like in my notes, it's like,
That's
damn,
amazing.
Miss Minutes, and then she's crazy. Is also
Yeah.
what I wrote after that. I think she might be the most dangerous person or character in the show at the moment because she is, like I said, a fully
Yeah,
like singularity, a singular AI with
she's
like
the smartest
full
person
free
in the
will.
room,
That's
and
terrifying.
she has all of the
So,
secrets,
like,
right?
we need to
she's
all
terrifying.
tread carefully.
And she's a cartoon clock.
Yeah, she knows everything. So she might be the most right. She might be the most
Also,
important
wait,
and
one more
dangerous character, actually.
I'm
So
so
we'll
glad
see
we got this
what
moment with
happens
Miss
there.
Minutes,
Before
especially
no,
because
go ahead.
gave light to a line she drops in the first season. So I watched the whole first season before coming to the first episode. And in season 1, episode 2, at the beginning, if you recall, once Loki is like on board with the
Nice.
TVA and he's like gonna help Mobius with the mission, right? Beginning of that episode, he's sitting at a desk with Miss Minutes, and he's I'm not sure if he's reading the handbook or he's like going over a video. I think he's going over a video, and Miss Minutes is trying to explain something, and he starts like swatting Miss Minutes, and she's like, stop that! Hey, stop it!" And Loki asks the question, "What are you? Are you a recording or are you alive?" And she says, "Well, kind of both." And like it's at the time it's kind of like a quirky, like funny line, but like looking back on it now, it's like, oh shit, like there was a lot of truth in that line. Like, yeah, she's a recording, and yes, she's alive. That was neat to see that line come full circle here.
Right.
Also, her implanting her face onto a
Right.
mannequin. Yeah, super scary. When we got into that room,
Yeah, that was
the
terrifying.
first thing I asked,
I was like, this kid, this is not
like,
okay.
seeing the room was
I am
what's
very,
with the
very freaked out.
mannequins? Because it was like he's an inventor. Why are there tons of mannequins everywhere? And they still didn't answer that question, but it became very clear
Yeah.
why the director wanted mannequins in the room very fast. That was a very uncomfortable scene, and I loved it.
Right. 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 Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like the
absolutely.
comparison kind of too, right? Like there was a little bit of contrast between Miss Minutes in that moment and Ultron, because Ultron's very sophisticated AI who wanted his own body and created
Yeah,
one himself.
I
So there, it's very
absolutely agree.
possible Miss
I
Minutes
think
ends
you're
up creating
absolutely
her
right. I
own
think that's absolutely a
body
plot
at
beat
some
we're going to
point
see
too,
unfold.
because if she gets
Yeah.
powerful enough. So this is going to be very interesting to see what happens. Very interesting. Yeah. In that scene though, right, when they're still there, Sylvie ends up coming back. And she comes back at an awesome moment. Renslayer is giving this speech. I don't know if you recognize this, but Renslayer is giving this speech. Um, and I actually don't remember exactly what the speech is about, but it's about order, right? And like getting her way or whatever. And the last thing that Renslayer says is, "I'm order." She like refers to herself as being order. And Sylvie appears, and in my head I was like, and there's chaos.
That feels like, yeah, they're
And it's
purposely
like
doing
exactly what I thought of when
contrast.
Sylvie appeared. So I was like, I wonder if they, I was like, they had to have done that on purpose. Because like Renslayer's giving this awesome speech that ends with "I'm order," and then Sylvie like appears and it just like completely like, makes
No,
the whole
I
space
like
go
that
chaotic because
contrast.
she's
I think
obviously
you're right.
trying to
It's
kill
definitely on purpose.
Timely. Um, yeah, that was a cool scene. And then of course, yeah, because like she comes in, she's like blows everything up, so everyone gets knocked out, and then she goes to the variant, Timely, and Timely makes a case.
Well,
He fights for his
well,
life
like
with his
it's
words,
I
and it
love that
works. And
speech that makes because it's
Sylvie
more or
backs
less
down
like
and
what
tells
Sylvie
Loki
like
that he
said,
better be
right? When
right.
she was
Very
being
interesting.
hunted by the TVA, and like now she like they've role reversed, right? Like, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right. That's such a great point. That is such a great point. Yeah.
yeah.
Sylvie's
Now
literally been
she's
him
literally him.
her whole life when she was running from
Yeah.
the TVA, because they were hunting her for something she hadn't done. And she was hunting
I
him
actually felt that
for something he hadn't
like
done.
Sylvie. So I actually felt like Sophia DiMartino's performance in that, like listening to Victor, like I actually found that like really touching. Like it was very emotional, like when like the realization of like what she's become and like what she's about to do, uh, and how she can't go through with it for that reason. I loved that performance. That was
Yeah.
awesome. Hmm.
Yeah. She's fantastic. And then after that, yes, okay. So after that, Loki and Mobius and Timely go back to the TVA, and there's one last look from Mobius to Renslayer, and then Mobius walks through the door. And this is an awesome scene here at the very end of the episode where, Sylvie and Renslayer are talking basically, and Sylvie's like, "I've dreamed about killing you hundreds of different ways and the most gruesome ways possible, but what you really want is power, and you want to be with he who remains
So
at the
careful what
top,
you wish for.
and so you can." It's basically, I'm going to send you to be with him at the end of time. Yeah, careful what you wish for, line, and kicks her to the end of time
Oh,
with he who remains his dead body. What a like totally savage. Like, and that is an insane. That was wild, because you can see that, to us, it really hasn't been that long. It feels like, since He Who Remains was killed, 3 episodes prior, at the end of season 1. And because season 2 picks up right away, but his body looked pretty
it
decayed
might be
for
anything as
it being
much as like
such a short
Sylvie sent
space of
her
time. So
to
I wonder
a
what the
different
actual
point at
time
the end of
slippage there
time,
is.
right?
I don't know if it might. It's not like there's no. It's
Listen,
probably a
it either
non-thing.
all
It's
makes
not like
sense
a
or
very
none of
important
it
thing. I'm
does.
sure, like
Time
important detail, but the important
travel.
detail comes when Miss Minutes comes back, and or none of it does.
You set me up for it. I was so excited.
Exactly. Perfectly put.
Damn it, that's the end of the line. Ah!
I did. No, I'm glad. I'm glad you did it. Time travel. Am I
Oh,
right?
didn't stick the landing. Ah, damn it. Oh well.
Come on now. I had to finish it for you. Time travel, am I right? Either it all makes sense or none of it does. It's Scott. He's a
I don't
baby.
care what
He'll
anyone
grow.
says. That is like the best use of Hulk in any movie. He'll grow.
Yeah, it's one of the best. One of the best for sure. Anyway, so real quick, the last part of this episode is Miss Minutes. Like Renslayer brings back Miss Minutes at the end of time with He Who Remains, and Miss Minutes doesn't feel worried at all. But she drops a hint that there's a huge secret that Renslayer doesn't know about herself, and that's like the cliffhanger we get left on. I
don't.
So
the only thing I can like really think of,
I have no idea. Do you have any idea what it could
like,
be?
I feel
have
like
zero clue.
For the way that episode ended, it's got to be a secret that we also don't know. It's got to be related to like that call, right? Because like Renslayer doesn't know that she's already been in cahoots with He Who Remains, right? As we learned in that recording. So like it's got to be something related to that. But yeah, no idea what though.
Right.
You know what I thought for a moment? Real quick, you know what I thought for a moment?
Yeah, it's
I'm
going
not
to be
sure
super
if this was
interesting.
right.
I'm super excited.
There was a moment.
Definitely the best episode.
I think there's still a chance
What's
that
that?
this is true.
Mm.
I wonder if Miss Minutes and Ravonna Renslayer are the same person. Yeah. Like, or like Ravonna, like, maybe she doesn't make it or something, and like the AI that is Miss
Same
Minutes is
person?
like based on her or something. Yeah.
Based on her?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great point too.
Oh, question for you.
There's so many ways to go here.
Every episode has had a focus
There
on
are
the
so many
TVA
ways to go.
handbook.
It's going to be very interesting.
Every
see.
episode, it's come up. And
Yep.
they want us to remember Ouroboros wrote the book. It even came up in the third episode.
Mhm.
We even see a picture of him, just in case we forgot that adorable man. What is
Mhm.
so it didn't really set off an alarm bell until that moment, until like we see that
Right.
picture. What do you think that's about? Because like that's way too intentional. Like they really want us to remember that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every
That's a good
episode
point.
they're like
So is
they're really
Casey
hitting
in
us
the
with
second
it.
episode,
And even in
right?
this one, like
Casey's
Timely was like
worshiping him,
worshiping
too.
him basically
Huh.
for writing it. A variant of
Interesting.
He Who Remains. Like
He's definitely a
Yeah,
bigger deal
right.
than we know him as right now, right?
like yeah, there's that's the thing. There are so many like little things that could happen. Like Loki, like we said earlier in our episode here, like Loki could actually be in some weird roundabout way part of the reason the TVA exists, right? Like, or OB could be a reason.
Right. Yeah, it could go in so many different directions.
It's a brain fog. I mean, my brain is overloading because there's so many possibilities. But it's like, we were led to believe that like He Who Remains and Kang the Conqueror, like they are the guys to worry about. But
Ravonna
there
in the
are
recording,
there are other people at
Kang,
play who could
presumably it's
have
Kang.
played huge roles.
probably
It
He Who
seems
Remains.
so.
He says that she was the thing that like tilted the scales in his favor. So like, what was it that Renslayer brought to the table? Because you're right, that's a dangerous player that's there, right? And we don't know exactly what. Going back to OB for a second, I just wanted to ask you if you were aware of this. Do you know what that name means, Ouroboros? Okay, so I was only familiar with this because of my love for Full Metal Alchemist. Ouroboros is like the snake that is eating itself. So like it represents infinity. That's how you stick the landing on a reference.
I'm having trouble reconciling that.
Nice.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I thought it was just like
but that's actually a true
Like, I
statement.
thought
My
it was
brain
just like
just
a
exploded. I have
cute
no idea how to
reference
think
or
about
like,
that. That's
how like Mobius is named
if
Mobius.
OB is
like in
OB is infinity.
Game, Tony Stark invents time travel using a Mobius strip. Right? Like I thought at first it was just something like that. But like now that we're at episode 3 and they keep stressing the importance of this man, I'm like, all right, maybe it's not just a cute name that they came up for him. Maybe this is something else. It's so fun. Yeah.
Oh man, this is interesting. I love this.
Yes.
This is the best Marvel TV show for sure. They're crushing it. It's so good. All right. Well, we don't do scores here because we're not done yet, but we'll see. We'll be back
Is there anything you want to
in
call
a few
right
weeks
now,
with the final
before we get to the end?
discussion on the last 3 episodes. Oh, so good. I don't know if this is going to happen. We don't really have any evidence of it, but I hope that there's some connection to Quantumania in the next 3 episodes. I hope we get an explanation because there's been a lot of theories about how Scott Lang came back to a different timeline after Quantumania, and how Kang isn't dead, because we know that Kang the Conqueror will return based on the end of the movie. So I really hope we get some kind of dot connecting. And if we're not going to get an answer, I doubt, but we're going to at least maybe have another another little piece of evidence on what possibly has happened. That I hope we get a breadcrumb, at least, the very least, that links us somehow to Quantumania and King the Conqueror. That's what I hope happens somehow. But I really don't have
two things.
I have no idea.
One,
this is it's really exciting.
Loki pruned Loki.
What about you?
Episode 1. And I'm gonna also I got 2 more. Wild. X5 recruited Mobius into the TVA, yes. And also Time Pie is a thing. I don't know what that last one means. I don't know what it means, but it's a thing. It's gonna be a thing. It's gonna be a thing.
Listen, of all of them, I hope for your well-being and sanity that Time Pie actually ends up being a thing. Because I think you'll be more disappointed
let's here,
if it's not.
But we are not at. Just because we're run out of time doesn't mean we're at the end of time. We'll be there 3 episodes from now. But until then, may the review be with you.